When you work in Google Sheets and you have what is essentially a large table of information, you may find that filtering and sorting and even some of our more complicated functions, for example, if or COUNTIF or SUMIF, don't quite get you the answer that you would like. Then you may decide to look at the database functions, where you can create a criteria range that lets you kind of filter for a particular item and then give an answer based on that criteria. It's kind of a multi-level approach, but sometimes it's exactly what you need, and it doesn't hide any of the information like filtering would do. So hi, I'm Terry, one of the Consumer Technology Specialists for Mid-Continent Public Library, and today I invite you to look at Google Sheets and some of my most favorite functions, the database functions. Our example today is a little unique in that this is a spreadsheet of someone who is going to be ordering music for a small ensemble of some kind. And so as we look at column A, we can see that this is a list of the different companies that we're going to order from. And rather than put in the real names, we just have their names abbreviated here. So we have a JP and a CG and some others as well. Now, the cost each is the cost of that music for each person. So, for example, this first one is $4.95 per copy. And then in C4, as we look at the formula bar, we can see that we are ordering 12 copies. So it's times 12. And so it's a fairly straightforward spreadsheet. But again, keep in mind that this is very small. Large companies are going to have 1,000 rows or 10,000 rows of information that they are trying to find. And so what happens is sometimes a sort will give us the answer we want, and sometimes a filter. Well, the problem is I can filter, but I can't actually add each one of those cells very well, especially with the large spreadsheet. I could even run out of room in the formula because I'm limited to the number of characters. So how can I do some of the detecting and setting up criteria that I need to do and then still do math with those answers? Well, the answer might be a database function. So let's look at a quick comparison here. For example, let's say that I want to find the company CG and I want to count how many of those are listed here because they're not in any kind of an order. Well, I could go to A20 and then I could go over to the right to the Functions button. We'll just go to All and we'll look for COUNTIF. And then we'll click on COUNTIF, and it says, okay, well, what's the range? Well, the range is simply A4 through A18. And then I'll put in my comma that separates the range from the criterion. And then what's the criteria? Well, it really just needs to equal CG, but CG is text, so I'll put that in quotes, CG quotes, and press enter. And it says I have 4 CGs. So let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, and that's correct. But here's the thing, if I then want to find, say, JP, I have to go in to A20 and edit that formula to then find JP, or what's another one, AJ, but let's do JP. So I have to come in and actually edit the formula to get my new answer. There needs to be an easier way to find answers sometimes, and that is really where our database functions come in. So how can I do this same thing but make it really easier and still see, unlike a filter, see all of the data as I'm working on it? Well, what I need to do, first of all, is I need to create what is called a criteria range. And if I want to find a company, well, what I can do is come over to A3 and copy that, and then I think we'll separate this here a little bit. So we'll come over to H and just paste in company. And we have to be careful that we don't have any hidden spaces either before or after those words. And then what is the company that we want to find? Let's see, let's do JP. And that is our criteria. All right, now what do we do? Well, let me come down just below the original formula here in A21, and let's go to our Functions button, and this time we're going to come down to Database. And what I really wanted to do was just count how many JPs I have. Now, count counts numbers, but decount A will count non-blank. It counts text. So let's do decount A. And what do I want to count? Well, first of all, what is the database? Now, that's exactly the same question that we were asked before. Well, the database in this case is really just this column, and I'll put in my comma. What is the field? Well, I can either type in the word company in quotes, or I could click on A3. Either way, but it's always the column heading is what is the field, then a comma. What is the criteria? Well, the criteria is the criteria range, which is here, H1 and H2. And we'll press enter. Look at that. And we have the 5. Now what's fun is I can come up to H2 and simply put in CG. Press enter. And notice that now in A21, I have my new answer. If I come back up to H2 and I change this for something else, HP, and press enter, it automatically updates what is in A21, which means that by using a criteria range, I can be so much more versatile in how I have answers and the questions that I ask. Now let's look at another example where we have some of the database function names in column E. And the first one here that we're going to look at is count, keeping in mind that count is going to count some type of a number. So that means that we're going to be looking at column B or column C for our criteria as well. Now this is where it gets really kind of interesting. So for example, we could use total. So I could go to total, do a Control C, come over here to I1 and paste in total. And then I need to have some sort of a criteria. So it needs to be greater than, less than, equal to whatever I type here in the total. Let's say that I'm on a budget, so I'm looking for any of the totals that are less than, let's say $55. And so I can come here to F5, go to my Functions button, come down to Database, and this time we're going to do a count, decount. And it's going to ask us basically the same kinds of questions, but this time I'm going to broaden out what we do just a little bit, because for database, I might just say, you know what, the database is really A3 through C18, and put in my comma. What is the field that I'm really interested in? What am I looking at? Well, I'm looking at total, aren't I? So I'm going to click on C3 and put that in, although I could also put in quotes total and then a comma. And what is the criteria? Well, it's I1 and I2, which means that I'm looking for any of the totals that are less than 55. I don't care what company that is. And then I can press enter. And it tells me that there are 4 that when I did the multiplying by 12 wound up less than $55. Now this is where it gets even more interesting, and all it takes is a really quick edit. So I'm going to go back to F5 and I'm going to delete the formula that I do have. And we're going to still do a count. We're going to go to Functions and come down to Database and decount. And again, our database is still just A3 through C18. Put in our comma. What is our field? Well, it's still total, C3, and a comma. Now, the criteria, and this is where it gives you so much versatility. We could say that we want to find the company HP, and we want to find out if there are any of the pieces of music that we're ordering that have a total of less than $55. In that case, I click and drag over H1 through I2, and then I can press enter. All right, so there aren't any of those, so let's see, are there any JP? Oh, there are two there. And you can see how versatile it is, because once I use the criteria, then all I need to do is come in and change the criteria, and it gives me the correct answer for that particular criteria. And I don't have to go in and do a lot of editing of formulas. Isn't that just spectacular? Well, let's come down to total, and let's also look then at how we could do a sum of the different products. So, for example, I have CG as the company. I might want to know what the final bill is for my CG company. And so I might change this total just a little bit, because I know very well that I'm going to have some totals that are over 55. So maybe I'm just going to say that are over $20. I know that the company is CG, and I know that I'm looking for any total that's over $20. The other thing that we need to understand about criteria ranges is when I have the criteria on the same row, that's the same thing as an and. So the company has to be CG, it can't be anything else. The total must be over $20 and nothing else. So they both have to be true for me to get an answer. All right. Well, let's go to total here, and this time we'll go to the functions button, and we'll come down to database, and this is called dsum, so it's almost at the bottom of our list. What is our database? Well, it's A3 through C18. Put in our comma. What is the field? Well, we're still really looking for the totals, aren't we? Because we want to add up the totals based on the different companies that we're ordering from. Put in my comma, and then what is the criteria? Well, it's definitely H1 through I2, and enter. And it tells me that I'm paying $230 and some cents for all of the music that we are ordering from CG. Now, let's say that we want to change that. So I want to find out JP, and maybe I want to even change that to any amount that's over $30. And it will automatically adjust. Well, what about then G? And it automatically adjusts. So this can be such a great help when you're trying to find out information for more than one thing without writing a million different formulas to get the answers that you need. This can be so intentional and kind of at the same time very pointed in the answers that you find. Now let's do one other thing, and that is a little kind of crazy here, but let's change this back to CG for the company, but for the total, let's say that we want to move that down to I3. Tell you what, let's do this. We want CG or anything over 45. So with our criteria ranges, when the criteria is on separate rows, we then have an or. So this reads, the company is CG or any amount in the totals here that is more than 45. Wow, that's just all of them. Let me find a better one. Let's go with greater than 55. So we'll cut out some of them. And then we can go back to our total here, and let me just kind of wipe this out and start over. So what is our total we want to find? We'll go to the functions button, go to database, dsum. What is our database? Well, it's A3 through C18. Put in our comma. What is the field? Well, we're still looking at the totals mainly, aren't we? Put in our comma. And what is the criteria? It's H1 through I3. Press enter. And now it gives me the total of all of this music that is either all of the CG company or all of the titles that are more than $55. Wow. So you can see how you could just keep adding. And by the way, you're not limited to just 2 columns of criteria. You can add in ands and ors if you want to get really complicated. Just remember that with your criteria range, it always reads from left to right. So you must meet the first 2 column conditions and then move on to the next column and then to the next column. But that just becomes amazing in the scope of what you can do. Well, let's then look at the average here. And we might stay with our company as CG, but let's just look at the total in general, and we'll say anything over 35 again. So what is the average of the totals for the CG company that are at least over $35? So we'll click in F7. We'll click on our Functions button, go to Database, and this time we're looking at the average. So what's the database? Well, it's the same. It is A3 through C18. We'll put in our comma. What's next? What's the field? Well, you know, we're C17. Let's fix that, C18. Let's go with our field then. What is the field? And by the way, I have clicked on this so that if for any reason you don't understand what the database, the field, or the criteria are, you can always click on those words to get a short explanation of what that means. But for our field, we're going to go with total, which is just C3, put in my comma, and then what is the criteria? Well, the criteria range, we're back to the company CG and anything that is over 35 in the total column that is with that company. And we'll press enter. And that's $57 is the average. Now, if I change the company, no problem, I can do that. If I go with, we had a G, right? If we have HP, every time the average changes depending on the company and what we have spent. And again, I could change then instead of the company, I could change the total, or maybe I do a combination of both. And keep in mind also that this is an and so I'm looking for the company and whatever this is. So now let me insert a column. And I'm going to put cost each, which in some ways is the same question as the total. But for our max, let's come down. And again, we could just singly look for the cost each. So we can go to our Functions button and Database. And this time we're looking for the max number, the largest number. So that is D max. What is the database? Well, we'll just say it's the whole thing here, A3 through C18. But because we're really just looking for, say, the largest cost each, we could even say just B3 through B18, and that would work as well. But we'll just come here and select the whole database, put in our comma. What is the field? Cost each. What is the criteria? Oh, well, we didn't put any in. Right now, we're going to say I1 through I2 and press enter, and it's going to go, what? But let's go with cost each. And we're going to say that it needs to be larger than $1. And evidently, the largest cost each, period, is $6.25. Look at that. Now, if I decide to change that max so that it includes the company, for example, well, let's delete what we have and let's put in a different formula. So we'll go to Database, we'll go to D max. what is our database? Might as well include the whole thing, put in our comma. Cost each is B3. And what is our max? Well, let's go with H1 through I2, so we're looking for both the company and the cost each. And if I look at HP, the most they have charged for their sheet music is $5.95. Let's look at CG. Well, let's look at AJ. And that changed quite a bit. That's where the large number was, $6.25. And so I can go through and change my criteria, and as I change the criteria, my answers automatically change. Well, let's also then look at min, and we can look at, again, our functions here and database, and this time we want the dmin, the minimum. And what is the database? Well, it's the same thing. So let's try that again. Let's go to our function button, come down to database, and we're going to look at dmin, the smallest number. What is our database? Well, it's A3 through C18. Put in a comma. What is the field? Let's do cost each, which is B3. Put in our comma. What's the criteria? Well, we can do this. Company and cost each, and press enter. And so the smallest number for that AJ company is $5.25. Now let's play with this a little bit. Let's say that we want to find the AJ company. We want to find anything where the cost is more than $1, and then we even want to find the total, any total from any company that is over 45. And I think we probably need to do that under totals, don't you think? So let's do this. Let's do a fun one. Let's go back to our functions, and we'll do database, and we'll do dsum. What is the database? It's A3 through C18. Put in our comma. What is the field? Total, comma. What is the criteria? Well, it's the whole thing here. So we have an and an or, where AJ is the company, cost each is more than $1, but the total is more than 45 for any of the totals in this list. Press enter. Oh my goodness, and it gave us the whole thing. So you can see how you can just get kind of crazy here with all that you want to do. Oh, let's try CG. And it changed these, but not this. Let's say the cost each is maybe less than $4. Let's see if that changes. Not so much. It changed some of these, but not really here. So let's say that we're looking for the ones that are greater than 55. And then we get a different number. So as you go through, look at your ands, look at your ors, and I think you will have a wonderful time using database functions with Google Sheets. We have taken a very brief look at the database functions I think you're probably most likely to use, but there are other ones that, depending on your math needs, you may need to use. So let's also look, we did look at d-average and d-count A. There is a d-get, so you can get a single value from a range if you need to do that. So you would actually say, I want to find the one value that's $6.10, for example. We looked at d-max and d-min, but d-product is the product of the values, so it would multiply for you. The standard deviation, then standard deviation of an entire population. So there are several here. You have the standard deviation, it's a sample as opposed to the entire population. We looked at dsum, and then also we have the variance of population sample, or a variance and then the variance of an entire table. So we have several kinds of math here that I don't really use, but some people do. You may decide that you need to use this standard deviation or the variance of a property that would help you with the kinds of math and statistics that you do. And these are also here. So just keep in mind that database functions help you work with large quantities of data to easily find the answers that you're looking for where filters may not be the answer, or where it may take a more complicated formula that you're not comfortable writing or may not know how to write. And so database functions do a lot of that work for you. And I'm going to encourage you to play with them and see how you can make them work for you. Remember that criteria ranges can be very versatile as well as you work through this process. To learn even more, be sure to go to mymcpl.org/online learning for such great resources as Universal Class, Learning Express Library, LinkedIn Learning, and Udemy Business. We also premiere videos every Wednesday and Friday at 1 o'clock. If you miss a video premiere, you'll still be able to find it later when it's convenient for you. You can find us on Facebook at MCPL 360, and you can find us on YouTube by going to our MCPL MO channel.